podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rosie Nice, executive coach, leadership development consultant, and founder of Magic Coaching. And in this new series, we'll be exploring how organisations can thrive and help their teams reach their full potential by creating a successful coaching culture. I'll be talking with leaders from a wide range of organisations, inviting them to share their personal, real-life experiences of embedding a coaching approach within their workplace, hearing their successes, the challenges they've faced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Our aim is to offer practical insights and inspire you with the confidence to cultivate an environment where coaching becomes integral to organisational success, a culture of healthy, high performance. So hello and welcome to this episode in our series focusing on building a successful coaching culture. Today, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Dr. Peter James. He is a high-performance coach, a business strategist, a training and development consultant, and principal and CEO of HCG Strategic Solutions. And Peter's based in Chicago, so today we're delighted to bring in a perspective from the United States. So hello, Peter. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me there, Rosie. Excited for our conversation today. Excited for all the things that we'll be talking about.
Me too. Perfect. So let's start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm in the States. I'm in Chicago in the United States, in Illinois, born and raised in New York City. My journey from a career perspective took me from an officer in the United States Army to a sales and marketer in a large pharmaceutical firm, actually GlaxoSmithKline out of London. And then I transitioned into higher education thereafter. And I was taught business and entrepreneurship type classes, but also launched a business on the side while doing that as well, which is this coaching and consulting business. I won't get too much into detail yet about how I got into coaching. I still do a little bit of adjunct teaching on the side, but that bread and butter, of course, is that coaching and consulting business, HCG Strategic Partners.
Well, that's a rich and varied background, Peter. Thank you. And we'll look forward to hearing more about that as our conversation progresses. So today, we're going to be looking at understanding the different ways in which your clients define a coaching culture. We'll talk about the benefits of embedding coaching within an organisation. And we'll be hearing about your work with your clients across a whole range of sectors and how you help organisations build strong coaching cultures through your consultancy services. So we're here to talk about building a successful coaching culture. And one of the questions I've asked everybody that's been a guest on this series is to help us understand what you perceive a coaching culture to be. So could you start by helping us understand your definition of what do we mean when we're talking about a coaching culture?
Thank you so much for that question. And listen, it's also a very much a loaded question because I'm sure the responses continue to be a little bit different as you hear them. My initial response when I hear coaching culture is awareness, strictly self-awareness. Do the leaders, does the organization, does it recognize the importance of how they're showing up, how they're communicating, how they are holding each other accountable? And so now, as you dive in a little bit deeper, are they embracing coaching behaviors and are they woven into everyday leadership, everyday communication, everyday development throughout the organization? Of course, most organizations today understand the value of coaching, and there is some specific research around the value of coaching for those organizations that have leaned in and those that have not. But again, as I've mentioned, whether it's the one or two-way communication, the psychological safety, the developmental conversations, the leaders as coaches, when an organization is able to embrace those fully, then I think we have that true definition of a coaching culture.
Thank you. And one of the interesting things that I've found talking to different guests is that they all have defined a coaching culture differently, differently according to their organisation, their ways of working, etc. And some organisations seem to start with a very clear definition of the culture that they're working towards. They put practices in place to help them create the culture that they've defined. And other organisations have said, we didn't realise we were building a coaching culture. We were just doing what we felt worked and what felt right. So what's been your experience with the organizations that you've worked with thinking about coaching cultures?
You're so right there, Rosie. Most organizations don't set out on this journey and say, yes, I want to be a coaching culture. But what they do want to do, and I think most of them understand that, how do you build a stronger internal culture? Why that's so important? I think that from a coaching and consulting perspective, Rosie, you and I will always have a lot of work to do with organizations. Why? Organizations are filled and made up of individuals, different backgrounds, different experiences, different genders, different upbringing, different religion. All of this difference, the diversity, dare I say, is brought together. And now everyone's trying to work together on the same page, following the same mission, the same vision. That's chaotic. And I say it's chaotic because if I take a step back and we look back at our own families and our extended families, that's chaotic, right? For most of us, it is.
Yes.
But now we're trying to do this from a work perspective, have outcomes that we're striving for. We have customers and all these differences coming together. It's challenging for all organizations. So how do we continue to strengthen that to the best of our ability, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year? That takes dedicated and focused effort. And it's important that we don't just pay attention to the bottom line, that we also pay attention to how we can continue to strengthen our culture day in and day out.
So you've talked about thinking, first of all, about your own experience. You said you were in the army, you've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, you've worked in higher education. So you're clearly passionate, knowledgeable about coaching. What brought you to coaching and embedding that within your consultancy?
Oh my goodness. I had the unenviable fortune of surviving 3 reorgs and layoffs in a matter of 18 months. And it put a bad taste in my mouth by the end of the third one. Actually, after the first and second one, it put a bad taste in my mouth. But by the third one, I was paying attention to the organizational culture and its leaders, and there was a disconnect. But also, if you think about it, Rosie, after a third reorg or third layoff, the leaders are starting to look over their shoulder. They're starting to worry about their own livelihood and viability. And so as leaders, now they're taking their eyes off of the leadership capabilities and focusing more on what I need to do to remain in this job. And that hurt morale, that hurt communication, that hurt so many things. And I think the first job of a leader is they have to be thinking of their team and how they can perform even more than themselves. And this was not taking place, understandably so. But now, how can an organization help to set up better success for their leaders and then ultimately their frontline employees? That's a challenge, how they can work together, how they can be better together. I didn't experience that the best way, and I wanted to ensure that I helped organizations in the future do better with that. That introduced me to coaching. I had my own coach. It changed my life wholeheartedly. And I said, hey, I got to do some more research to figure out about this coaching career and industry, but then also dive on in to see how now I can help organizations strengthen their culture from the inside out.
So was it your own experience of engaging in coaching yourself that made you educate yourself and become so passionate about coaching?
Absolutely. I think it was that combination of the experience that I went through, then having been coached myself and how transformative it was. That combination really had me fall into coaching, and I haven't looked back since there, Rosie.
Wow. You talked about your consultancy business. How do you integrate coaching within the services that you offer as a consultant?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So at HCG Strategic Partners, we have 3 specific pillars that we focus on in order to help strengthen organizations from the inside out. Those 3 pillars are executive and leadership coaching, leadership development, but also transformational change initiatives. Those are our 3 core areas. Now, don't get me wrong, we do other things, but that's what we're leading off speaking about. So if you think about those 3 things, coaching, leadership development, transformational change, if an organization can lean more into those 3 areas, that's a great starting point for helping make the culture better and have better outcomes, to include a stronger bottom line.
And how do you feel when you talk about coaching within your different organisational clients? What sort of reception do you get? How warm are people to the idea? How knowledgeable are people about coaching?
The great thing about it these days is most organizations are aware of it. That doesn't mean that they've leaned in. They're aware of coaching. They know about leadership development, also transformational change. I will say this, depending on the organization, depending on the individuals within the organizations I'm speaking to, it could be a CEO, could be a CFO, or even HR, I have to ensure that I am talking their language. I got to know a little bit about the industry. I have to know a little bit about their direction, but I have to know about or understand their pain points. And I have to align what we do with their pain points. Once they understand what I do and I can understand their pain points, then it's an easier conversation about how they can get to the next level of whatever or maybe how to get out of their hole or their rut or begin to eliminate that pain. So I'm having to be very strategic. We're having to be very strategic when we're having conversations with different industries. And truth be told, our number one industry is healthcare, and then we divest into nonprofit, higher education, and then also government as well.
Okay, interesting. And when your clients embark on this journey, what type of factors motivate them to get involved in this transformational change?
Again, for every individual I talk to, their motivation could be a little bit different. So the CEO is thinking about that bottom line revenue, mostly. I have to be able to connect the internal culture, as we've been discussing, with that bottom line revenue. Now, the HR individuals, the HR director, the HR VP, the revenue is there. They're very aware, but it's not as strong as it would be for the CFO or the CEO. So I can talk more of their language about the strength of their organization, strengthening their leadership capabilities, climate surveys, things like that really resonate with them. And then once I'm able to talk their language and they can understand how this can help their organization, how it can benefit their organization, then we're on to something for sure.
And you talked a little bit earlier about some research that shows the value of coaching, the benefits of coaching. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. And I'm not going to go too much into detail because I don't have all their actual research articles. But what I do know is that, and we've probably all read some of this research, how coaching cultures report revenue growth that's much higher as compared with those organizations that have not leaned into coaching, that employee engagement is also much higher for sure. And then customer satisfaction also is increased. And then that customer satisfaction can also tie into regulatory compliance, profitability, and even shareholder value. Think about that. An organization that leans into a coaching culture, you're not just benefiting or strengthening the individuals within your organization to include your leaders, but then you're having better outcomes. And some studies are suggesting almost a 700% return on investment when you're able to lean into that coaching culture from that perspective. And I don't know about you, that number sounds pretty darn good there, Rosie.
I think anybody would be happy with those type of results. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we're hearing through the guests that we're talking to is the culture piece around it becomes a nice place to work. There are great values, great alignment between the values that people talk about and the values that people demonstrate, people's experience with the organisation, and also that link to productivity, profitability, business success. And is that something that you've seen? I'm not talking about the research, I'm talking about your experience. Is that something that you've seen tangibly demonstrated?
Absolutely. Hands down. Now, the caveat to that is I want your listeners and those who are really paying attention to this coaching culture conversation for them to understand that this process is not a destination. And what I mean that you can't just bring in coaches, begin to try to identify coaching culture, and then, hey, we made it. We are a coaching culture. No, it's ongoing. What is the next level to get to our higher level, a better level? And if I can give an example, a great analogy is going to the gym or going to get a workout in. It's one thing to work out at the gym by yourself and go religiously. But just think about this, Rosie. If you and I go to the gym together, now we're challenging each other. We're holding each other accountable. And then there's always that next level that we can challenge ourselves to get to. That's coaching in a nutshell. Bringing in that partner, that accountability partner, that mentor, that individual that maybe not doing anything different than you would have done by yourself, but leveling you up, challenging you to newer heights. And so now bring that back full circle to the organization. We can continue to get better, continue to improve, identify different strategies, hold each other accountable, improve how we communicate with our customers. There's always small tweaks and better ways that we can continue to do that. So embodying this coaching culture is definitely not a destination. It is a marathon, dare I say.
I think it's really helpful for people to hear that it's not a destination. You don't ever get there. You're moving, you're continually working, developing, enhancing, moving forward.
Yeah.
So what is and I'm sure you're going to tell me that it's different for every organization, but is there a typical path that you would see an organization progress down or up if they are choosing this as the path they're going to walk down?
Yeah. Now, I will say this. You're absolutely right, Rosie. For every organization, it's just a little bit different. However, unfortunately, what I see from organizations a lot is that they venture into this path when something internal has happened, has occurred. And then they want to right the ship and make things better so that we don't ever experience that or go down that path again. But what if an organization can learn from others and be proactive in strengthening their organizational culture? What if they can really help their leaders sooner rather than later, and then also communicate expectation, their values, how they desire to communicate, and continue to sharpen that each and every day? That's the recipe, as opposed to waiting and seeing. And so if you're an organization right now, or if you're an organizational leader that's listening to this, please look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, hey, how can we improve our professional development? How can we improve this coaching culture conversation, even inside of our organization? But at the very least, how can we continue to make small steps to strengthen our internal culture so that it's a great place to work, so that customers just love to experience what we have going on, but then also it's having a direct impact on our revenue as we continue to move forward? There's always a way. And are you talking to the right people to get there? And again, you're right. Every organization is a little bit different, but they all share one thing. They're human beings that are working in there. And so now how do we continue to support them as they move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say to a leader who is listening right now, who really wants to adopt a coaching approach, is fully bought into the coaching concept, but nobody else in their organization seems to be getting on board? What would you say to them?
I would say lead by example. Think about that. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. Not even sometimes. In most cases, actions and behaviors speak louder than words. So get a coach for yourself. Allow that partnership to help you, and then act on what you're learning. Improve your behaviors. Improve your communication, improve your productivity and your retention of your team. Once others begin to see what's happening, and then they ask you, hey, what gives? How are you doing so much better? Then you have a great response for them and something that they're going to want to look into as they move forward. So you're right. Not every organization is quick on the draw to be able to dive into that, but sometimes those actions and the success speaks louder than even the words do.
So you're talking, I guess, about a ripple effect of some people adopting coaching behaviors and emulating those behaviors and that rippling out around them.
You said it so much better than I did, Rosie. I should have used that. Yes, the ripple effect is much better than how I said it for sure. But even think about that. The ripples on a lake or on water, it can spread. And if you're a leader, hey, lead that process.
And I think that's part of the process, isn't it? Because there is a difference between a leader who engages in coaching conversations, which is great, and the building of a coaching culture, which is a much bigger, deeper, more longer term journey to embark upon. Has that been your experience?
Listen, I'll be the first one to even say there, Rosie, that just the idea of a coaching culture can be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But how do we start small with it? If you're a leader in the organization, you're a leader. Lead this initiative in a small way. What could that look like for you to build momentum, to build that ripple effect throughout the organization? And that's the way that I've seen it be successful in organizations that have not historically leaned in this way. It starts small and begins to spread. And whether you're in HR or even not, dive on in and see what the effect is. Now, when I say dive in with coaching, you have to play full out. Again, going back to the gym, you can't go to the gym and do it halfway there, Rosie. If you and I are in the gym, I'll say, come on, Rosie, you got 5 more in you. And Rosie might say, no, I only got 1 more. But you see what I mean, though?
Yeah.
When you're able to play full out and really experience it, change is going to happen. Positive change is going to happen. I guarantee it. But you have to be able to lean in a little bit there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had conversations with managers, as I'm sure you have, and leaders, and we've said, well, create a coaching culture in your team, create a coaching culture around you, do what you can. And we can't change everything, but we look at our circle of influence and we build the coaching culture around us in the way that we behave. And that makes a difference.
Absolutely. Think small initially.
Yeah.
The saying goes, correct me if I'm wrong there, Rosie, how do you eat an elephant? Is that what it says?
Yes, absolutely.
One bite at a time. If you're looking at the whole elephant, you're like, no way. But if you take small little steps, small little bites, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. If I can make another analogy, I mentioned the gym, but let's go to athletes. Let's talk about athletes. The best footballer, some of the best footballers in the UK, they have already made the league. They have already become professionals, but they continue to work on their skills, to sharpen their skills. They continue to go to the gym. They bring in a trainer to work on their things that they've been doing since they were kids. Why is that if they're already professionals? Because they understand the value of, I have to continue to reinforce this and strengthen this. So now I got to go back to the workplace. Why don't we think like that in the workplace? Why don't we think that we need that coach, that trainer, that mentor to help us continue to thrive? If we can really adopt that, then I think this coaching culture conversation begins to become a reality throughout the organization, and the organization becomes strengthened as a whole.
I absolutely agree. When you think about sports people, tennis players, football players, athletes, they practice, they rehearse, they practice, they train. And yet I'm frequently come across leaders who say, I've been promoted to a leadership position and I've been offered no training. I've been offered no coaching. I've read a couple of books, but I haven't had that training. I've been expected just to know what to do. And I think it's the same with coaching. It's a skill. It absolutely can be learned and developed. And if we perceive it as something that we need to practice and learn, I think that helps us develop and get better.
Absolutely. I wonder if all of us can become corporate athletes in some form or fashion, right? Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be? I'm interested in, you've obviously worked with many different organisations through your consultancy, and I appreciate client confidentiality, of course, but are you able to share with us a journey that one or two of your clients has been on when they've been bringing coaching into their organisation? I think it's always lovely to hear some real life stories to bring it to life.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm thinking about an institution right now that I'm working with. My disclaimer is this there, Rosie. There is no straight line with this process. Life is full of ups and downs, curves and twists, right? We know that about life. Business is all about ups and downs, curves and twists, and the curveballs that are thrown at us. And no business is a straight line. Therefore, in the same vein, this coaching process, it can be quite challenging. So I'm working with a client right now, and actually a university, and the university president has challenged her cabinet to get coaches for themselves. Now, you think about it, most of the cabinet has never had a coach. So now some are skeptical about walking into this. What is this about? I'm having to bare my soul to a certain extent and talk about the next level. And so I'm coaching one of the VPs on this institution. And truth be told, they're skeptical. They didn't know what they were walking into. And I had to be that individual who lets them know that, hey, this is a safe space for you to be able to grow, period. Whatever it is that you want to talk about today, whatever challenges you may be experiencing, whatever plans and goals that you want to set into motion, I'm your partner on this journey for the time frame that we have. It could be communication challenges with your leader. It could be customer challenges as well. It could be whatever the case may be, or it can be, how do I continue to strengthen my own leadership capabilities day in and day out? And then it's now my responsibility to come in there and challenge them. And as I always tell them, yes, I'm going to give you homework, but it's not homework in the sense that you probably understand it. It's homework that you get to be able to practice, to implement the behaviors and the actions that need to shift a little bit. I want you to try them out and see what happens, and then come back and let me know, hey, how did that work out? What got in the way? And when this coachee was able to lean into it, and that's a big one right now that we've chatted about a little bit already, they're able to play full out and lean in, then they're able to see, here are some of my gaps. Here is what I need to shore up. And here is what I need to do in order to get to that next level. And that next level may be their own university president or their own position of higher responsibility. In order to get there, you're going to have to demonstrate some skill sets, some communication skill sets as well, and then how to operate in different types of environments. When that trust is established early on, anything is possible in that type of a relationship. And that's a small example of what that can look like for leaders in that vein.
Absolutely. And what do you think is behind some of this? Maybe it's skepticism about coaching, maybe it's reluctance to engage in coaching. Is it lack of understanding of what coaching is about? What do you think is behind this skepticism that sometimes you will see when coaching leaders?
I honestly think it depends on the individual and their background and their upbringing. Here's a great example. There are still so many people today who have not leaned into therapy, going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or even a social worker to talk about some of the challenges that they've experienced. A lot of people have not done so. Why have they not done so? Maybe it's because they're not comfortable bearing their soul in that type of environment. They're not quite sure about what to expect with that. They're not comfortable, maybe because they've had some negative experiences in their past about confiding in someone. It could be a number of things, maybe their family dynamic. And so now coaching to them, they may have heard the word, but they may not believe it and think that, oh, I'm good all by myself. I got here, didn't I? And then lastly, they just may not be comfortable with leaning into something like this. I got another great example. I'm coaching an individual from the Middle East, and his upbringing was very tumultuous. A lot of war, a lot of distrust. And so now he's walking into an engagement with me. I will be the first one to tell you the first couple of sessions were a little bit rocky. Why? Because of his past and his upbringing. And he even admitted this. The way he communicates does not correlate very nicely in the workplace. So he raises his voice a little bit more. He maybe talks down to individuals. He had to become aware of that and then understand how changing that may allow his career to thrive even more. But he was hesitant about confiding, bearing his past and his upbringing. Even in what little I've just shared with you, there's a lot of layers. And so now the ability to be able to step into this container, as I call it, and be transparent, be vulnerable in order to get to your next level is challenging for some. And it's understandable. I'm never one to criticize. I'm never one to say, hey, why aren't you doing this? I have to first understand who they are and why they may be going through what they're going through, why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. So hopefully that answered your question there, Rosie.
Yeah, interesting. I'm hearing you saying that part of your role is to challenge, but to build the trust first so that people can be vulnerable and can take that challenge as a positive thing and a learning thing, not a criticism when you're challenging people. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I'll even add to that, the trust is not just a trust in confidentiality. The trust is they're trusting me with their careers and even their lives in some cases. Two really quick examples. I've had a young lady say to me, you saved my marriage. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm definitely not a marriage coach, so I'm not quite sure. But some of the strategies that she implemented at work, she also realized that they were beneficial for at home because there were some behaviors that she was experiencing at work that also carried over at home and vice versa. Again, what a powerful statement to make to me about that. And then going back to this individual that I had mentioned to you earlier, I also tied in the background about raising his voice and getting more stressed. I had to say, hey, how might that be affecting your health? How do you think it could affect your health? And the response was, well, my doctor says I do have hypertension. So you see, there's always a dotted line connection, not even just in the workplace, but into other areas of life. And so now I'm able to say in that instance, think about your health. Think about your family. They want you around. Think about now how you can do this job and this career and this leadership thing differently so that you can show up better at work, but also, dare I say, better at home.
Yeah.
You see how that trust can be built even more when I'm tying it back to something even more personal.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because as an external coach coming in to coach this leader, you have that additional benefit of a degree of separation that sometimes leaders who are coaches don't have. And that's an interesting, different types of value of different types of coaches. I think the leader coach building the relationships with their team, the external coach consultant coming in to offer that degree of separation with the coaching that they offer.
Absolutely. And I think both are important in their own lanes.
Yes.
So think about the leader as coach. He or she needs to ask those powerful questions. He or she needs to be a better active listener as they move forward. So they can practice those coaching behaviors day in and day out. No, don't get me wrong. When I say practice, improve upon them day in and day out. However, being under the organizational umbrella, that provides a different dynamic. The external coach, I'm able to come in, and whether I'm coaching the leader or even their direct reports, I have a new vantage point. I can maybe even go in a little bit harder because I'm not tied to the organization. I don't have the hesitance about being compensated as they are every 2 weeks. And so that plays a factor into all of this as well.
And I think what I'm hearing you saying is that there are many different ways of incorporating coaching within organizations. You've talked about adopting coaching behaviors. You've talked about leaders carrying out coaching sessions. You've talked about external coaches coming in and offering coaching. And there are many different ways that we can integrate coaching into organizational life. And I guess the question I would ask you then as we come towards the end of our conversation is, based on your experience, what advice would you give to an organization who is considering bringing coaching into their ways of working? If there was 1 or 2 tips that you would give, what would they be?
Well, this has been a great conversation. I can't believe we're already near the end there, Rosie. So thank you so much. Great question, though. And we've kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, too. Start small. This doesn't have to be where you're playing baseball, you're swinging for the fences. No, just get a base hit. Talk to a coach. Talk to an individual who has experienced coaching. Ask them for a referral. Ask them for someone that they can bring in to have that conversation and what it would look like. And if you don't know anyone, hey, start doing some searches. Actually, if you don't know anyone, you're listening to this podcast right now. You have 2 individuals that you can reach out to for sure. I'm so passionate about coaching that I first and foremost desire that you talk to anyone to get the ball rolling and to begin to find out what it could look like for you and your organization. And I say you and your organization because if there is any hesitancy, again, as I mentioned earlier, be the one that raises your hands to say, hey, I would love to dive on into that. You know, what's interesting there, Rosie, is I have offered free coaching for individuals just so that they can see how it could go. And it's interesting. I get a lot of people who don't respond and don't say yes to that. And sometimes I wonder, why don't they? Is it a time commitment? I'm only asking for an hour. Or is it other things such as, again, the transparency and the vulnerability? They don't know what they're walking into, that unknown too. So you have to be brave to a certain extent to want to begin this process. But as you and I have been talking about, the outcomes are so important, so beneficial for organizations worldwide that they are missing out if they're not having coaching as part of their future.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree totally. And before we finish, Peter, is there anything else that you would like to share or say? Anything else that I haven't asked you or given you the opportunity to say?
Wow, I feel like we've talked a lot about different things. We've talked a lot about the coaching cultures. We've talked about the benefit and how it can benefit not only the individuals, but the organization's bottom line. If I could go back to what I just mentioned there, my one ask is for those of you who are listening who have never ventured into this coaching culture or just in coaching, give it a chance. Step into it, be brave, be vulnerable, be transparent, and watch how it can not only change your life, but help to change your business as it continues to move forward.
Fabulous. Thank you. So it has been a great end to what I found a fascinating series. And I'd really like to thank you, Peter, for coming and sharing your wealth of experience with us and bringing up some really fascinating and thought-provoking points. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Rosie, for even putting this together and for even asking those great questions. You're definitely the brainchild behind all of this. So keep up the great work for sure.
Well, thank you very much. And finally, as we close this series about building a successful coaching culture, I'd like to thank all of our lovely guests who have so generously shared their experiences and their stories, their highlights and their challenges, and their top tips for success. Thank you to the Association for Coaching for their amazing support and technical wizardry. And most of all, thank you to you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast series as much as I have. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.